Is it possible or not that Trump will run for president in 2028? On the way to Japan on the plane, Trump was asked, "Are you going to run for president in 2028? I have," said Trump, "a team of Brands and Rubio, and I think that's a great pair capable of winning the presidency." And if it was possible, the journalist pressed, "Would you run for office?" "I would love to," Trump continued. "I would love to. I would fix the country and put it in order, but I don't think that's the right step." Is that even possible? Because Steve Bannon talks about it as something possible. Let me remind you, Steve Bannon was a top aide, maybe right or left-hand man to Trump during his first term. And now he has popular podcasts and a huge influence on Make America Great Again, that is, on Make America Great Again.
I didn't really think about that. We have some very good people, as you know. One of them is standing right here. We have JD. The vice president is wonderful, and so is Mark. I doubt anyone will oppose us. If they ever formed a group, they'd be unstoppable. I really think so. I believe in it. I would love to do it. I have the best stats ever right now. It's terrible. I have the best stats. You see, if you read this, I don't rule it out. You'll have to let me know. All I can say is that we have a great group of people. We have a great group.
Trump didn't answer the direct question, so are you definitely not going for a third term? But Trump in general, he doesn't like to cut off possibilities. He doesn't like to give certainty. He likes to keep things a bit vague. That's how he speaks. At the negotiating, action, or any table, anything is possible, nothing excluded. Here's Steve Bannon.
He will get a third term. So Trump in 28, Trump will be president in 28. People just need to accept that. So about
the 22nd Amendment.
There are many different alternatives. At the right time, we will lay out what the plan is. But there is a plan, and President Trump will be president in 2028.
There is a plan. Former White House chief strategist and original Make America Great Again man Steve Bannon is once again claiming that Donald Trump will get a third term. He isn't alone. President Trump has also repeatedly suggested running again. He is even selling merchandise with Trump 2028, both online and in the White House.
Naturally, this makes Democrats go out of their minds, which is probably exactly what Trump is aiming for. Maybe they're freaking out over trivial things like a hat that says Trump 2028. How serious is this, and how hysterical are the Democrats?
All right. The demolition of the East Wing this week also added fuel to the fire. Would you completely renovate a house you're about to move out of? Not really.
I'm cheating a little. Of course, the Democrats are even kind of nice. Trump isn't planning to go anywhere for the next 3.5 years. If you need to live in a house for 3 more years, will you renovate it or leave it as is? Of course you'll renovate.
This is happening as President Trump seeks more control over elections and appoints election deniers to key roles. My panel and our text chain arena are back. Brad Todd, is President Trump going to run in 2028?
No, and he doesn't think he can. Yes, that's what I think. Jared Kushner once called Steve Bannon a dead man walking while in the White House. I think this is just another attempt to cause problems and get attention. I'll tell you, if there was a plan, I don't think they would announce it. In an interview with The Economist, I love The Economist, I subscribe to The Economist, but that's not the place where this kind of news would appear about The Economist, but that's not the place. The news goes through.
Listen, I appreciate your optimism and I hope you're right, but I think we need to take this seriously. I completely agree with how you presented the beginning of this segment, Casey. First of all, you don't make a grand overhaul that causes a lot of controversy. You'd completely tear down the East Wing of the White House, even if you're only staying for 3 years. It seems a little, questionable, Second, maybe he's planning to host a lot of balls there. Yeah, maybe he wants to.
It's a legacy.
Vence Rubio in 2029 and 2030 in his own vision. Listen, we all need to take this very seriously. Both independent lawyers and those from the Democratic Party and establishment are closely watching this. We've been studying this for a very long time. That's why, because we don't want to end up in a situation where we're unprepared and don't have a plan in case he actually decides to move forward with it, with this.
Trump talks about the economy, which is naturally the number one topic for America, about immigration, inflation, and crime. All of these are issues that concern everyone. Corrupt officials stealing money, taxpayer. And the Democrats, responding to his escapades, are talking about repairing a wing in the White House. Well, the topic is absolutely uninteresting for electors, taxpayers, voters, for anyone. About the consequences about Trump persecuting gays. What's not true, but even if it were, people just don't care at all. He talks about fair international trade, about the racial tricks of the Democratic Party. He talks about how Melania was dressed. He doesn't say it, but that's what they're talking about. Like Hamas, hooray, doesn't respect Trump. Like Putin, hooray, hooray, is leading Trump by the nose. Normal people are fleeing the Democratic Party.
I have to say, as someone who covers the White House, I have no information about the plan that Bannon is describing. It's important to note, as you mentioned, that he's a former White House strategist now out of that role. But listen, we've heard the president reflect on this. Joke about 2028. He also has hats. Earlier this year, we noted that even without a specific plan, there is still a political strategy. He often mentions 2028 when his White House is criticized for a certain issue or crisis. So it distracts attention. It also keeps people on edge. You and I talked about this part. I mean, we know what this White House is. There's also plenty of trolling online and, so to speak, owning the Dems and liberals. I think that part of the attention here is important. And I think there's a connection between this and the construction of the ballroom. Even when he leaves the White House, he wants his particular mark to remain on the White House. By
the way, I agree with that commentator, but Trump is remodeling a wing in the White House. Well, because it means that doing something has become inconvenient, hosting guests, balls, and celebrations. And like a normal leader, Trump said, there's a problem, we need to solve it. He decided so they wouldn't smell, excuse my French. He gave his own money and asked a few buddies, throw in 20-30 million each if you don't mind for a good cause. So they chipped in. Among those who would really like to see Trump stay longer, several scenarios are being discussed in the White House. For example, that he can't be elected for a third term in a row or separately as president. But supposedly he can be elected as vice president. And then they say, we'll switch places. But because of the 12th Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, that's impossible. Well, it's impossible. Take a look. It's like talking about how nothing is written in the budget memorandum. Well, it's written in the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. He cannot be elected to the office of president. The second option is to amend the Constitution. That's great. After Roosevelt, who was elected 4 times, by the way, they introduced a ban on more than 2 terms. And it doesn't matter whether the terms are consecutive or not. But what do you need to amend the Constitution? 2/3 of the Senate? No way. And I think 2/3 of the states have to ratify it, which is impossible. Today, in the current environment, no one can even imagine that anyone could ratify such an explosive issue. Another option, of course, is an armed uprising. But I don't think Trump, his people, or even the army would go for that. A nationwide poll won't change anything. They asked the people who said yes, give Trump a 3rd term. Gentlemen, we have a constitution, and a nationwide poll can't override the Constitution. Well, you know. What else is Trump doing by supporting talks about a possible presidency in 2028? The thing is, the president's 2nd term. You see, some presidents serve 1 term, some serve 2. The president's 2nd term practically ends after the elections, in the middle, 2 years before his term is over. So after that, everyone starts thinking about the next president, and the influence of the current president decreases significantly. I know Trump will remain president, but everyone will focus on who comes next. To prevent this from happening, to make sure his influence continues, at least until February of the election year, that's when you need to announce whether you're staying or whether you're planning to run, I don't know. So Trump gets an extra 6 months of full-fledged presidency just because he supports this, what I think is nonsense. That's it. So Bannon isn't bringing up this topic for no reason, and Trump isn't being vague and evasive and getting on the nerves of the Democratic Party and their supporters for nothing. And naturally, this means he keeps his name. He really loves when his name is at the top of all the articles, speeches, videos, and so on. He's just a person who believes that it's one of his presidential duties to have people talk about him all the time. That's why he was elected the first time. I mean, I think one of the huge advantages he had was that he was constantly in the news all the time. People got used to seeing him in the news. He always seemed to say the right things despite constant criticism. That's how it was. Not just that, right? At the same time, there's a game whose goal is to make the Democrat lose his temper in the Supreme Court for no reason. Trump's people are now pushing through one of the most fundamental changes in the country's political life. I've told you before, but I'll repeat it. During the era of the fight for minority rights, well, mostly black people, in the United States, they introduced something. They passed a law that each state has the right to change the boundaries of voting districts. Well, this was meant for Congress to create districts with a majority black population so that former slaves could elect their own representatives to Congress. This was at a time when black people, well, practically weren't voting yet, weren't participating, and when no one in a white district would probably vote for a black representative. Well, it was probably hard to imagine something like that back then, but times have changed, gentlemen. It's been, at least 60 years already. The mayor of Chicago is black. The mayor of Los Angeles is black. There are black mayors in many other cities. Black senators. We even had a black president. Half the country voted for him. Honestly, it's unclear who she is. Black, gray, or something else. But she is dark-skinned. So back in the day, the majority of the country voted for President Obama, meaning a huge number of white people, because without the majority of white voters, he simply wouldn't have won. So does this law exist? Well, I mean that they have the right to redraw these districts, to cancel them, and to require the creation of new districts, the geographical one. So the trick invented by the Democrats can't be used anymore to, so to speak, draw the districts. You just can't imagine what they did to get more Democrats elected, can you? Of course, they worked hard for that, and in all the Democratic states, they're doing the same thing. So the districts will be created geographically, and as it turns out, honestly, that's how it's written in the Constitution, geographically. As it turns out, this will give the Republicans from 12 to 19 additional members of Congress, and the Republicans already have a little more, right? The case is going to the Supreme Court, and discussions are underway now. Here, listen.
Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in the case about the redistricting of voters in Louisiana's electoral districts, which could actually put part of the Voting Rights Act at risk. Maybe it's, no longer necessary. It's not necessarily required to keep manipulating district boundaries based on race to fix problems that go back to the Jim Crow era. Right? Maybe we've moved past that now. That was the argument yesterday, and a lot was revealed. I'm going to lay all of this out for you and explain why this is such a turning point. But there was something else that was revealed yesterday during those arguments. I think now we have confirmation. It's not just a hypothesis. It's not just, us trying to read between the lines and figure out if it's true. No, we have confirmation. Ketanji Brown Jackson might very well be the dumbest woman in Washington District of Columbia.
To clarify, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was mentioned, she is a Supreme Court justice, one of the 9 appointed to the Supreme Court, of course by Biden. But not for wise decisions or the ability to explain complex things in simple terms, but for faith in the cause of Lenin, Mao, Biden, Obama, and Trotsky. Yeah, sorry, she also sang on Broadway and lifted her skirt.
The essence of the matter was indeed presented here by the lawyer advocating for preservation. These districts were specifically drawn to make them predominantly African American. Now, they are universally represented by Democrats, African American Democrats elected in these African American districts. The lawyer at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People explains why these districts should remain as they are. Listen carefully to what she says. This is
correct. Result, Louisiana. This analysis was conducted in the NERN case, and it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats did not vote for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not. And we know that there is such a significant gap between how black and white voters vote in Louisiana. There is no doubt that even if there is some correlation between race and party, race is the determining factor.
In other words, so this is Janai, drugs, Elson, and this? The prosecutor just said that white Democrats would never elect a black Democrat to Congress. You still don't believe me? Will you listen?
And it was clear that regardless of the party, white Democrats did not vote for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not.
White Democrats heard, yes, they don't vote for black people. Whether those black people are Democrats or not, it doesn't matter. We were just told that in the American South, white members of the Democratic Party, including those who are racist Democrats, we were told that the Democratic Party fights for diversity, but except for diversity of opinion, of course, that's absolutely not allowed. But they fight for all other kinds of diversity. But it turns out they're all just racists over there. Well, there are a lot of black Republicans in Congress, which means that white Republicans vote for black Republicans without any problem, but white Democrats don't vote for black Democrats. It's amazing.
white Republicans gladly voted for a black candidate if that candidate reflected their values, principles, and priorities. But you just heard from the lawyers at the ACP that white Democrats won't vote for black Democrats regardless of political affiliation. Well,
all right, let's move on to the brilliance. So, Ketanji, people sometimes say singers strain so much their brains fly out.
white Republicans gladly voted for a black candidate if that candidate reflected their values, principles, and priorities. But you just heard from the lawyers at the ACP that white Democrats will not vote for black Democrats regardless of political affiliation. No.
She hasn't gone crazy, of course. No, she was never in her right mind. She compared, I just can't believe it. She compared disabled, crippled people to black people. Larry, the podcast host, is right. If Trump had said that, for example, he wouldn't just be killed, he'd be impeached. His own people would impeach him. That's even worse than the Jews. They mix the blood of Christian or Muslim infants into matzo, whoever they can get, basically. They mix their blood in. Look, black people are like disabled people who can't climb the stairs. And that's why all the stores are required to. They were forced to make an entrance with a ramp, so the same should be done for black people. Make a special entrance and special districts for them. Because they can't go up the stairs, they need it to be with a ramp. Gentlemen, can you imagine the stupidity of the Democrats if they appoint someone like that to the Supreme Court? Editor. If he's below average, dumb, even dumber, and completely stupid, then who do they consider smart if she's such a fool?
They do.
They're disabled, they're black, so they don't have access because they're disabled. I think I should just let her words
resonate with you.
And stand there. Because if I said that, if I made that argument, I would rightly be called a bigot. By the way, I never make that argument because it's both stupid and almost evil. I'll give her extra points for using the word paradigmatic. Good job. Look at you with paradigmatic.
There's no truth to the Babylon Bee headline that Clarence Thomas pulled the judge aside after arguments and gently explained that not all black people are mentally challenged, only she is.
No, not all black people are disabled, only you. Now to the question, who judges the judges? May I? Ketanji Brown Jackson will answer, who judges the judges? Ketanji Brown Jackson? Why am I showing you all this? The democratic machine has become so deeply rooted in every corner and aspect of our reality. Isn't that right? They've become so ingrained, I don't even know how to put it. They've embedded themselves into every single aspect of our lives that neither democracy nor a republic nor the separation of powers work anymore. Everything is bypassed. Everything that could have prevented the nomenclatura from staying in power, party, race, age, marital status, orientation, or gender don't matter, only power does. Are you one of us or not? Yes, and Trump is the first, I think, president. Well, in more or less modern history, I don't know who else wasn't one of us. You also brought people into your second conversion who weren't one of us either. Either they switched from the swamp to Trump or they weren't one of us from the start. So, if the court decides that districts can't be redrawn to get the result the swamp wants, then Trump will have a powerful Congress, which will be even freer than before November 26th, even more so, even more, and will pass things joyfully. Decisions that will help the country, not just help one class in this country, namely the elite. In other words, for the first time in, I don't know, maybe 100 years, the country is in a situation where the government, when the government has to choose between the party and ideology, and on the other hand, the country and justice, chooses the country. And that's amazing. Well, just amazing. It's really great. I would put it this way. I've never seen anything like this, and I never believed that something like this could happen. We have to make such changes in the country. Continuing to go back, it would be
insanely difficult.
You can never say impossible. It's always possible.
But it's insanely difficult.
And for that, of course, another Trump term certainly wouldn't hurt. But I don't want any laws to be broken. At first, you're glad that your chosen officials did what you wanted, and you don't notice the violation of the Constitution or the law. But very soon, someone you didn't choose comes along and says, "Oh, great, well, I'll do the same thing." And he does it in a way that's convenient, beneficial, and easy for him. And since you supported your own candidate, now you can't do anything about it. This is called the boomerang law in political life. Let's hope that Trump is working on mentoring Vance, Rubio, and others, and is building a team out of them that can continue his work without giving in to pressure. The swamps and the moans of their so-called friends. But I want to draw your attention once again to how the dictatorship of the majority, which is called democracy, with a nice word to fool the people, how it turns into its opposite, how easily it turns into its opposite. A dictatorship of the minority, which we, to put a label on it, call tyranny. Well, so that the plebs get scared, this is democracy, meaning the dictatorship of the majority, and this is tyranny, the dictatorship of the minority, either of one person or of some small group of people, meaning a smaller number of people. Personally, when they take away what's mine, when they put me in prison for dissent and they don't care about my needs, it doesn't matter whether it's the dictatorship of the majority or the dictatorship of the minority. And to be completely honest, when my children are given indoctrination and stagnation instead of development, mental stagnation, I mean, this is done in the name of Jesus, Muhammad, in the name of equality of distribution, in the name of the great helmsman or the father of the nation, who is the biggest gorilla in the herd. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is that your money, your home, and your children have been taken away from you for the sake of communism, for the sake of Islam, for the sake of democracy, for the sake of monarchy, or for the sake of the revival of feudalism. That's right, along with the English Charter of Liberties. I don't care if I'm being robbed by a good or bad person, if he drinks tequila or kefir, or whether he beats his wife or is single. And you? What if it's him? The entire courtyard population allowed you to be robbed. Does it make you feel better that it was decided unanimously or by a majority, or does it not matter to you whether it was by majority or unanimously? And the even side of your street said, of course, go ahead and rob him. But do you really need them to ask the odd side of the street too? Or do you need both sides of the street to vote by majority so that something can be taken from you without your permission? It's like asking you a question. So it's like, what would you prefer us to cut off? Your right hand or your left leg? So whatever you decide, that's what we'll do. Well, personally, I would prefer that you disappear from my life so that I never see you again. And not only should you not touch, but you shouldn't even talk about any parts of my body. Well, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think common sense tells us that we don't really care who is robbing us. Yes, that's why, of course, I really admire what Trump is doing. He's making it so that the system doesn't rob us. Thank you. And really, it doesn't matter whether it's the Republicans who aren't robbing us or the Democrats who aren't robbing us, or the socialists who aren't robbing us, or whoever isn't robbing us. We don't care about that. Let them be, Lucifer. Leave us alone. Don't bother with that. On your own island or in that stinky place, I don't know, some kind of Shambari. Do whatever you want, but leave us alone. Leave us alone. Thanks to everyone who listened. See you next time.